Kelly, can you hear me?
I can. Hello.
Great.
I can hear you. I can see you. And I made you a co-host, so you should be able to share your screen if you would like.
Yeah.
Um, so I have 1 minute left. I'll stop sharing mine. And we'll start here in just a moment. All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the weekly webinar. It's 2 o'clock, and I am Kelly G. Loeb, your webinar host and the Community Engagement Coordinator for the KU ADRC. Happy to have you here. Thanks for coming. Today, we will hear from Dr. Eric Vidoni about why research participation is so important. I'll tell you a bit about him. Dr. Vidoni is an associate professor in the Department of Neurology at the University of Kansas Medical Center, and he collaborates with Dr. Jeffrey Burns on many of the exercise studies at the KU ADRC, and he also oversees our ever-expanding community engagement projects. So we are grateful to Dr. Vidoni for being here. I'll remind you all that you can enable the closed captioning as you like. Choose the button at the bottom of your screen that says CC. Please keep yourself on mute while Dr. Vidoni is presenting. And if you have questions, feel free to use the chat function. And we'll have time when we're finished hearing from Dr. Vidoni for any questions at that time. And we will have the recording available on our website within 24 hours. So with that, I will turn it over to our esteemed speaker. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kelly G. Can you see that okay if I do that? All right, great. Yep. So thank you. Thanks everyone for joining. I have a feeling that this wouldn't be a terribly well-attended talk because not everybody's interested in how the sausage is made. But I actually want to talk. I am in charge of, not in charge, that is the wrong word. I support what we call outreach, recruitment, and engagement here. And I report to the NIH about the things that we do at the ADC in those areas. So making sure that our community is connected to our center and that we are listening to our community about what is needed, making sure that the community gets the information that they need, and also the opportunities to participate, and then also that we are connecting people in the community with clinical trials that they may want to be a part of. So that's my responsibility. So I thought I'd talk a little bit about how we do that and why we do that, and a little bit of history on clinical trials that I think is really interesting. I'm not sure everybody does, but I do. It's a little hard for me to see questions, so feel free to put them in the chat. We have plenty of time for questions at the end if you're interested in that. Or Kelly, you can just jump right in, and I don't mind answering questions in the middle. So we're going to talk a little bit about how, the history of clinical trials and participation in clinical trials, and then just a little bit about how we've set up our center. So you peek behind the curtains, if you will. I don't really have anything to disclose other than I am an investigator on grants that are funded by the National Institutes of Health. I don't really have another stake in any game for this particular talk. So I hope that I can be trustworthy in that. So we have, as humans, a tremendously long history of putting weird stuff in our bodies. And so as early as 6,000 years ago, the Assyrians were reporting that they could use willow for pain relief. And as you may know, willow is essentially a source of the compound we now call aspirin. So they were putting willow, probably making tea or something, and then experiencing fever reduction and kind of relief of pain. So they were trying out strange things in their bodies. we've been using honey. We've known a long time that honey is kind of antibiotic, and so you can put it on a wound, and it helps prevent further infection and challenges in some cases. Of course, we've also done some other really weird things, like put dung in poultices during the medieval Europe. So not everything worked out effectively. We've probably tried a lot of things that weren't too good. And we continue to try really interesting things like amphetamine and cocaine and LSD. There's a whole new resurgence right now of interest in microdosing of psychotropic drugs like LSD for depression. So we love to put things in our body, strange chemicals in our body. It's a kind of human trait. And somewhere along the line, probably in the 8th century, people started to decide that maybe we should test these things out a little bit before just going crazy. So in the 8th century, Persian physicians were describing almost like a comparative trial. They would let blood in half their patients and see what happened versus those that didn't let blood on. So it's a very early controlled trial, if you will. We don't know if it was randomized or not. In the 1700s, there was a lot of interest in preventing sailors from getting scurvy, and the physician James Lind reported on 6 different treatments he tried for scurvy, and so kind of a multi-pronged study. And then in the 1800s, we really started to figure out, hey, we can't just we got to be more regimented about this and more rigorous about this, and we started to hone in on some of the rules that a little bit that now govern how we do science when we talk about medicine. So a very slow, long process of thinking about the scientific method in terms of medicine and care for people. But the regulation of medicines and other things and devices has really a very long history, and it didn't start off particularly well. So early on, the regulation of these things was not about necessarily safety. It was much more about protecting profit. And the patent offices was the first that really started testing things like agricultural products. And then as we industrialized, it made it a lot easier to ship foods and ship medicines, but also adulterate them, right? And mass produce them for sale all over the country. And things like snake oil were actually a real thing. And this is my favorite, Dr. Williams' pink pills for pale people. I don't know what it was, probably just baking soda compressed into a little pill. But we started selling medicines in bulk and in mass. I could ship them all over the country and all over the world. And because of that, we actually, the government decided they needed at least somebody to check on these things a little bit. And so the first director, this is out of a book called Vitamania, which is absolutely outstanding if you get a chance. The first director just hired young college guys to eat everything and try everything and see if it really made them sick. And which is probably still what we do. I would have done it. I still did it in college, right? I'd do just about anything for $5. So that was our first kind of like testing of these medications and these foods and on people, at least in the United States. And it was still in the Department of Agriculture. As with most things in the world, women, organized, strong women have demanded change. And in the early 1900s, both from a group of well-organized women and the publication of the book, The Jungle, people really started to demand better quality in their foods and drugs. And so in 1906, the Pure Food and Drug Act was passed. I don't know that it changed a ton, but there was the beginning of legislative pressure then that eventually created the Food and Drug Administration, sort of as we know it in the 1930s. But what really kicked off the power of the Food and Drug Administration was what historians refer to as the sulfanilamide tragedy of 1937. So this was yet another sort of snake oil that was sold as a antibacterial, but really a treatment for almost anything, kind of a panacea. It also had diethylene glycol, and if you know your chemistry, that's one of the things that we often put in antifreezes to make it sweet and syrupy, and it killed over 100, including a lot of children. And that was what really triggered that we first wanted to try many of these medications in animals before, just to make sure that they were safe for humans. But whether or not you are comfortable with animal safety testing, that was the elixir sulfanilamide tragedy was really what kicked that off. So, you know, the FDA has evolved over time, but their job is to ensure the safety of food. They actually don't do meats. I think the USDA does meats. They do our medications, our vaccines, our blood, when we do give blood, medical devices, and products that give off radiation, and some other things. They oversee the evaluation of new drugs, and they ensure that the ingredients and the amounts that are reported on our packaging are true. One thing that people think they oversee, and they really don't, is supplements. The supplements are a huge market in America. We love to put things in our body that may or may not be treatments that are effective, but the FDA does not oversee supplements. The supplements you take are often not tested for amount of active substance, their effectiveness, the amount of the active ingredients. One way to help know that you're taking a supplement that has been at least reviewed by someone is to look for a USP on the bottle. I can't even pronounce what the USP is, but it's a real designation, and it's a meaningful designation that at least someone has kind of reviewed what you're taking. It doesn't mean it's effective for what you want to take it for, but it does mean someone's reviewed it for the kind of quality of the ingredients and the amount that's being reported. So look for that USP if you are taking supplements. But the FDA is not overseeing those supplements, just FYI. So, okay, so that's a little bit of history of humans putting stuff in their bodies and how we've come to recognize that we need a little bit more oversight on that process. And I wanted to talk just a little bit about why does it take so long to discover a drug and to get one into the market? And it really can take up to 2 decades. And the first several years are just about thinking about what the compound might be, what molecule might engage with the tissues in our body to do a thing that we want to do. And some of that is, test tubes and petri dishes and things like that. But some of it is computers nowadays. We can simulate many of these things and just imagine them in a kind of virtual world, engaging with our tissues and our molecules in our body. And so a lot of that work now is in silico, as they say, or done on a computer. Once we identify a compound that we might want to try as a medication, that goes into making sure that it's not harmful to biological organisms, and oftentimes that's animal testing. A lot of times drug companies and others will also make sure that the compound is something that they can actually create. It doesn't cost so much to create it that it's not going to be worth our time to try it out as a medication. So there's some other kind of logistical questions that get answered in addition to safety questions. Once all of those things have been answered, we try it as usual back in those oftentimes young men who are willing to take on a little risk for a little bit of pay. So we do phase trial, different phases of trials, and typically phase 1 is testing in healthy adults, healthy young adults oftentimes, just to make sure that there aren't any crazy adverse events. Many drugs never get even to this phase. If they're too toxic for a mouse, for example, we rarely bring them into humans. So oftentimes, even in this early phase of human testing, we already know that this is a pretty safe compound that we can try and give to a living, to an animal like us. And so we try those first in human and phase 1 trials. We start transitioning, and we call it phase 1B or phase 2, into a few people with Alzheimer's. In my field, it's Alzheimer's, but in any field, it would be the person with the disease or health challenge. And then a phase 3 is really the one where we try it out on a lot of people, thousands of people. And that's really the definitive question about whether or not the compound has a medicinal or therapeutic effect. And again, those can take several years, 3 to 5 years to execute, especially if it's a disease process that's a little bit slow and you got to measure whether or not it's slowing the disease process, like Alzheimer's disease. Those trials can often take a long time. And then, the regulatory process, although it seems to be speeding up lately, sometimes the regulatory process, just getting through the FDA, getting a panel on the FDA to say, yes, this is a drug that we think makes a meaningful contribution to care, can go for a couple of years. And sometimes they'll ask for more studies, and sometimes they'll ask for this or that. So that can take a long time. So this is why it takes a long time to get a medication into therapeutic use in your doctor's office. In Alzheimer's disease, and actually many neurologic diseases, it's even more difficult. So this is a little bit of an older slide. I don't think the numbers have changed all that much, but this is for 4 different diseases. The HCV is hepatitis C vaccine, I believe. And so what it's showing here is that they tried 30 different compounds to get down to one that was effective and was approved. For MRSA, which is an infection, it took 13 different antibiotic type compounds to lead to a single drug. And that's kind of the industry average. About 15 compounds will be tested before one gets approved. But Alzheimer's, and this is very old, I know. I looked for a better slide. I couldn't find one. But in 2010, it was 120 drugs to get to a single drug. And that's kind of true across all of neurology in many cases. The brain is really good at keeping stuff out it does not want in there. And so just getting a drug to the brain is difficult. We call it the blood-brain barrier. And so that's one of the challenges. There are other challenges. The brain is a very, very complex place. And so we're still learning about what the right target is for those compounds in terms of what we want to try and change. But also just getting the drugs there can be difficult. So there's a much higher hurdle for things like Alzheimer's disease than some of the other drugs you might be taking, like blood pressure drugs. The other challenge, and probably the biggest challenge across the entire medical community for finding new medications, is trial recruitment. And in particular in Alzheimer's disease, recruiting individuals into trials is probably the biggest hurdle that we have for moving drugs along faster. In fact, this paper from 2016 called it a crisis in trial recruitment. And it is a long-standing problem. And it leads to widespread difficulty and high expense for trying to test new medications. And just to back that up, again, I looked for some more recent data, and I'm sorry, these are from 2015. It's a little old. 2011, this is a little old. But of those more later stage trials where we're really trying to test the efficacy of an investigational medication, this one study, and this is across everything, not just Alzheimer's disease, but this one study found that of the 2,500 clinical trials going on in 2011, 20% of them failed to meet their recruitment goals, and 40% terminated due to not getting people in the study. So I calculated some numbers on that, and basically 48,000 people participated in 491 different trials that were insufficiently powered to answer the research questions. That means we exposed, as a medical community, 48,000 people to a medication that we aren't sure works. We don't fully understand the safety of it. And to me, that's an ethical issue, right? These people entrusted themselves into the medical community, and we couldn't answer the question because we couldn't get enough people enrolled. So for me, that's why this is so important to think about how the sausage is made. How do we make sure that when you come to us and you trust us to put you in a study, that we're going to be able to answer a medical question about it? We may not get a positive result, right? We don't ever guarantee that. but we at least know that the trust you put in us will result in a advancement of our knowledge, and that we can answer the medical question that we set out to answer. And I think it's gotten a little better. I mean, we do a really good job here because the team that we have that I'll show you in a second is just absolutely outstanding. No less fronted by Kelly G herself right up there. So yeah, we really believe strongly in the importance of getting people in trials because of this. So it's really important to us that we fully enroll our trials. The Alzheimer's and dementia world have even more of a challenge because we have an increasing number of trials, so we need an increasing number of people. We continue to learn more about dementia itself, and we understand more and more and more that there are many causes of dementia, and most people probably have multiple things going on in the brain. It's not just purely amyloid. There's a lot of different things going on, and we need to be thinking about that. Right now, we struggle because identifying people with dementia is increasingly requires a lot of testing that some people don't like PET scans that expose you to a tiny little bit of radiation, and lumbar punctures, which always sound uncomfortable, although Dr. Burns does an amazing job on them. And we actually have evidence to suggest that his method has a very, very low rate of headaches. And just the whole scale of the operation has expanded because, as you all know, I think Alzheimer's is becoming just a tremendous problem that faces America, and the world, because we're aging into it. So it's a very big challenge in our field to get enough people to answer our questions, our medical questions. And this is from 2022. The Alzheimer's Association put this out. I thought this was kind of fascinating. There's 143 unique therapies that are being tested across 172 different trials. And we're going to need 50,000 people across the country to enroll in those studies to answer the question about whether those therapies are effective. And there's a range of different ways we're trying. Sometimes it's trying to enhance your memory and thinking. Many times, most of the time right now, it's trying to change something in your brain that would reduce your dementia symptoms, or the decline of your brain as a function of the disease. So there's a huge need. 50,000 people over 172 trials just last year, and I imagine that's growing this year as well. And looking at those numbers and knowing that I am in charge of all that makes me think about this, makes me feel like this. And I don't want to feel like this every day. I want to feel like this. And so I have been extremely fortunate, and the Alzheimer's Center has been extremely, Dr. Burns and Dr. Swerdlow have been incredibly visionary in thinking about how do we keep me from being screaming and get me back to dancing. And we've really thought about this from almost a business perspective. We are thinking about recruitment of people into trials as a real science, as a real important aspect of what we do, and that it needs a professional, complex operation that has a significant investment of money and time and people and intellectual energy. And that it can't just be me creating flyers, because I wasn't trained in that at all. I'm a physical therapist by training. So I don't make good flyers and I don't make good radio spots, but we need to professionalize those things. And we need to think about how we manage and collect data so that we can make it more efficient for you, that you aren't calling us every time and you have to tell us, every time you want to be in a new study and you have to tell us your story over and over again. We have records that we can kind of know what you're interested in, know what you're not interested in, and see if we can't match you with a study that you are excited about. And we know that you can't just, hear about this or read about it in the paper, that there are lots of different ways to get connected to research opportunities, and lots of different reasons why you might connect to research opportunities. So we need to innovate new access points to help you connect with us. And so you don't need to read all of this, but this is the operation that that Tina Lewandowski, who directs our engagement and recruitment, is building. And you can see it's a huge operation to make sure that you feel connected to the center, that you feel when you're ready to be in a clinical trial. All of these people are working hard to listen to what you value, listen to what you're interested in, and try and match you with the best study that meets your needs, and do that in an expeditious way so that we are answering those medical questions quicker that I talked about earlier. So Tina's doing a great job building a team of people to do that, and I get to claim credit for it all when I tell the NIH that I'm running this great show, but it's really all of these folks that you get to interact with every day who are doing amazing work to help you find the trial that you want to be a part of, and that excites you. We're also trying some other things we call My Alliance, and this is obviously you're on a My Alliance weekly webinar right now. We have a cognitive care network of social workers who are supporting physicians in the region and their patients for when they get a diagnosis, what comes next. And we think that's one way that people can connect with us, is through that support of their clinic. Excuse me. We have on the right, we have what we call our community partners. So we have a tremendous set of community partners, or mostly organizations that have connections to the community and can talk about, we provide them some dementia education, and they work in their communities to make sure that people know about dementia. And if they have needs around dementia, they connect with us if possible, or with the Alzheimer's Association, whatever makes sense for those folks. And we're trying to do that in Kansas City, and we're trying to do that in Central and Western Kansas. And we have some great partners that do that. And we're thinking about how those partners can help funnel people to us, and may end up connecting folks to studies as well. And then finally, there's essentially all of you all who are engaging. We want to provide you things that you're interested in, whether it's webinars or weekly newsletters, or we have some new ideas coming that can connect you with things that you need for your everyday experience, whether that's maintaining your brain health, or being a care partner for someone who's going through dementia right now. We want to provide those things directly to you as well. So these are all ways that we think that we can provide and serve you. But also, when you're ready, and when you think you want to be part of a trial, these are points that you can access our center through and get connected to research. So with that, that's how some of the recruitment sausage is made. And I'm happy to answer any questions, or oh, wow, I went long. I'm really sorry. I was going for 20 and I went 27. That is not cool. That is so professor of me, man.
No worries. Thank you very much, Dr. Vidoni. And we'll offer the opportunity to anyone who's listening still for questions or comments or things you can't live without knowing after 2:30 today. As you all know from reading the My Alliance newsletter every week, I'm sure in fine detail, we have several studies happening at the ADRC, and we're always looking for a few good folks to join in, whether you are a care partner or someone with a diagnosis of a dementia, or generally interested in contributing to research. So one way to find out about those projects is by reading the My Alliance newsletter and by participating in our webinars every week. So thank you for doing that. And we'll take one more chance to see if anybody's got any questions. I'm going to just scroll through the chat here.
Yes, Eric, I have a question.
Yeah. Perfect.
This is George Pro in Seattle. And the most recent drug that was released, I think it got FDA approval for trials, has a strange name, lecanemab, is that right?
Yep, I think that the brand name is going to be called Leqembi, but yes.
Leqembi?
Yeah, Leqembi or something. It's a little hard to say, but yes, lecanemab, absolutely.
Right, and tell us the history of that that went through your various phases.
It did. So it went through all the phases I just talked about. It is one of it and Aduhelm or aducanumab, which was also just approved, went through all of those phases. Those are the first two that what we call disease-modifying drugs. They are able to remove amyloid from the brain. And they were both approved with the removal of amyloid from the brain as what they called a surrogate for kind of approval. Every drug trial has to have one outcome that people decide on whether or not it's a working drug. And in this case, the removal of amyloid was the key thing. And there was a lot of debate about whether that was right or not. With lecanemab or Leqembi, it actually seems to have a little bit better effect on cognition. While our clinic is not rushing out to prescribe it, there's some encouraging signs that it may actually reduce or slow cognitive decline through removing amyloid. The thing about both of those drugs, if I remember correctly, is that they've both been approved Medicare is only going to pay for them if you continue to be part of a clinical trial. And that is because they didn't show really, really strong, well, this is my understanding. They didn't show really, really strong effects on changing memory and thinking. It's not like your decline was completely halted. People still have some memory and thinking decline. It just seems to slow a little bit on the drug. And so they want to do further studies to see if the effect of that is meaningful enough to go ahead and start paying for it. Because as you can imagine, they're very expensive and would cost CMS, Medicaid and Medicare a lot of money. And we're not 100% sure yet if it's going to have a generalizable meaningful effect on people. But yeah, they went through quite a bit of all of that testing that we just talked about. And they are the first ones that really target amyloid and can remove amyloid from the brain. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, but it's so frustrating because I heard another report that within the last several months that the amyloid plaque is lacking and they need to put more in the brain. Are you familiar with that? Just the opposite of what this drug is supposed to do.
I have not heard that. I know that there are a lot of theories still. I will be perfectly honest that there are many camps that believe that amyloid is not the target we should be going after. Some people believe that one way some people describe it is that amyloid is the smoke and it's not the fire, and we need to put out the fire. But there are others, very, very smart people who believe that amyloid is the target that we should be going after. And so I know it's very frustrating and difficult. And it's, I think what we're running into is that what we've been calling Alzheimer's for a really long time is probably many things. And most people, as we learn more and more, have multiple different things going on in the brain. So an anti-amyloid drug may work on some person who has mostly amyloid as an issue, but may not work on another person for whom amyloid is less of a problem. So we're still learning all about that. And I can't imagine the frustration for someone who's experiencing dementia, for us to say, well, we're not entirely sure yet, but that's part of why we do these trials and part of why we push recruitment so fast so we can answer those questions faster.
Well, so you need a way to measure the amyloid in the brain.
We actually have that. So we have the PET scans now, and we are able to measure amyloid loads in vivo, which is actually how these drugs got, I think, partially approved. It's very easy now to show how much lower the amyloid load is in the brain using these drugs. And they are very, very effective in removing it in the drugs. But to answer Leslie's question, the two drugs that have been approved also have a risk of a low risk, a small risk, but a risk of inflaming the brain. you have to couple the treatments with fairly regular MRI to make sure you're not inflaming the brain. And I don't fully understand exactly what's going on with the brain inflammation, but it is a small risk for those drugs.
Okay.
And sorry.
This is Leslie Price, and I have a couple questions. My husband is probably moving into the moderate phase. I've noticed a significant decline in the last couple of months. He was diagnosed in 2018, but was showing some signs in 2017. And he literally has pretty much no short-term memory. I can say a very simple one-word command to him and he can't even process it or remember enough about it to perform the activity. So a lot of times I have to show him. But what I will say is when we are consistent with exercise, cognitive activities, and participating in this dementia group that he goes to twice a week, he is better. He will show a better ability to process things. He comes home tired, but it's usually a better outcome than on the days that he isn't doing those activities. And I really feel like we need to have more of those groups developed. The woman that developed it, her name is Elaine Bardot, and her husband was diagnosed with early onset at 50, and he just passed away last year. He was a rear admiral in the Navy, very intelligent. And but she and he started this group for dementia patients. There's about 15 people in the group, and they do field trips, they do music and dancing and cognitive activities and socialization with preschoolers, and really has helped keep their brains sharp. We just need more of these groups across Kansas City. So if that word could be put out, that would be very important.
That is great. Great feedback. Thank you, Leslie. And we'll you know, we are always looking for ways to expand My Alliance, and I think that's certainly one. You know, we'd have to create a sustainable financial model for that, as you might expect. But yeah, that's a really important thing. And I think there were things like that building in Kansas City prior to the pandemic, and I think they took a bit of a hit in the last 3 years, and so we got to jumpstart those efforts, things like Jeannie's Place and so forth. So thank you.
All right. Well, thank you, everyone. Thank you, Dr. Vidoni, for sharing your insight and expertise. And thank you, everyone participating, for your attention and your questions. I'm going to put in a shameless plug for continuing to join us every Thursday. Next week, our topic is the CABA study. That's C-A-B-A. And the question that the study is examining is whether the supplement creatine monohydrate and if it benefits brain health for people with Alzheimer's disease. And our presenter will be Aaron Smith. So tune in next Thursday if you'd like to hear more about that. There will be some details in the My Alliance newsletter on Monday, the 13th. So you can join us if you like. And also I'll put another plug in for our LEAP program. LEAP stands for Lifestyle Empowerment for Alzheimer's Prevention. And as Ms. Price mentioned, keeping yourself active and empowering yourself to learn about the disease and learn about clinical trials is one excellent way of protecting your brain and taking care of yourself and your loved ones. So with that, I will tell you again, Dr. Vidoni, thank you so much for being here. Thank you to all of our participants. Have a good rest of your day, and we'll see you next week.
Thank you,
Bye-bye.
everyone. Bye.
Thank you.